A boot hit the stone with the weight of a war hammer. The torches in the courtyard guttered sideways as the carriage door slammed open in the cold dusk wind. Iron rattled. A chain dragged across the wood and clinked onto the steps. The Alpha King's jaw locked so hard the muscle jumped under his beard. He had paid 3 chests of silver for a bride. He had emptied his treasury to stop a war that was bleeding his pack dry. Every warrior on those steps held their breath at once. Then a tall figure rose out of the carriage shadow and turned its scarred face toward the throne. A wolf-fang choker caught the firelight at her throat. Who in the moon's name had they actually sent him? Stay with me on this one. The Alpha King's name was Selim, and on most nights his hall was the loudest place in the Ironridge Kingdom. Tonight it was silent enough to hear the carriage horses breathing. He stood 3 steps above the courtyard floor in a wolf pelt cloak that brushed the back of his boots, and he did not move when the iron chain clinked a second time. He had practiced this welcome for a week. He had rehearsed the soft words a king says to a frightened bride. None of those words fit the woman now climbing out of the dark. She came up 1 step at a time. She did not stumble. The chains at her wrists were heavy enough to break a smaller woman's shoulders, and she carried them like a belt. Her leathers were blackened with old smoke. A long scar ran from her left ear down across her jaw and disappeared under the wolf-fang choker. She lifted her head, and her eyes were the color of a winter river. They did not flinch from the king's stare. They measured him. Selim's beta stood at his right shoulder, a thick man named Doran who had bled beside him in 9 border skirmishes. Doran's hand drifted toward the hilt at his hip. Selim's left hand opened, a small sign that meant hold, and Doran's hand stopped. The whole courtyard saw it. The whole courtyard understood. Whatever this was, the king wanted to see it through before steel came out. A thin scribe rushed down the steps with a scroll, the one the Northpack envoys had sealed and stamped only 9 days ago. The scribe's hands were shaking so badly, the wax cracked when he broke it. He cleared his throat twice. He read out the name of the delicate Omega bride the Northpack had promised. The name was Lyra of the Pale Hollow. The scribe read her height, her age, her lineage. None of it matched the woman in chains by even a finger's width. Selim took 1 step down. The woman did not back away. He took another. His boots stopped 1 stride from hers, close enough that he could smell pine smoke and old blood in her hair. She was nearly his height. That alone should not have been possible for a Northpack Omega. He spoke first because a king always speaks first. He asked her name in a voice that the men at the back of the courtyard still heard clean. She let the question hang in the cold air for a long count. Then she gave him a name he did not know. A common name. A peasant girl's name. The kind of name a captive uses when she does not want to give up the real one. Believe me, every fighter in that courtyard heard the lie in it. Doran leaned in toward the king's ear. He did not whisper a translation. He whispered a warning. He told the king to step back. He told the king the chains were not heavy enough. He told the king to call the archers off the wall walk and into the courtyard now. Selim did not step back. He had not built this kingdom by stepping back. He had built it by reading faces, and the face in front of him was not the face of a smuggled servant girl. There was a quiet in her that he recognized. It was the quiet of someone who had killed enough people that one more did not raise her pulse. He asked his second question, and this one was sharper. He asked who had put her in those chains and put her in that carriage in place of the bride he had paid for. She held his stare for another long count. Then very slowly, she lifted her chained wrists and laid them across her chest, palms flat, an old pack gesture that meant I am bound, but I am not broken. Half the warriors on the steps drew a breath. They had seen that gesture before, but only in war stories. They had only ever seen it from one rank. They had only ever seen it from a war queen. Doran went white under his beard. The king felt something cold slide down between his shoulder blades, even though his face did not move. He had paid 3 chests of silver for peace. He was beginning to understand that someone somewhere had taken his silver and sent him a war in a wedding dress. He turned his head a quarter-inch toward Doran and asked, low, who she was. Doran's lips barely moved when he answered. The answer was 3 words long. The woman in chains heard it, and for the first time the corner of her scarred mouth lifted. Not a smile. The shape that comes before a smile. The shape a wolf makes before it tests a fence. The Alpha King let the silence stretch one more breath. Then he turned, climbed back up his 3 steps, sat down on the carved bench at the hall door, and gestured with 2 fingers. Bring her inside. Unchain her once the doors are closed. Clear the hall of every man who cannot keep his mouth shut for the rest of his life. The courtyard emptied like a struck bell. Inside the great hall, only 6 people remained when the iron doors thudded shut. The king on his bench. The beta at his right hand. 2 old guards he trusted with his sleep. The terrified scribe with the broken seal still in his fingers. And the woman. A blacksmith was sent for to strike the chains. He came with a short hammer and a chisel and would not meet her eyes. The pins gave with 2 clean rings. The iron fell. She rolled her shoulders once, a small motion, and you could hear the joints settle. She did not rub her wrists. She did not bow. She walked 3 measured steps toward the throne, stopped at the line of black stone that marked where common folk were supposed to halt, and waited. She was respecting the line on purpose. She wanted him to see her respecting it. She wanted him to know she could cross it whenever she chose. Selim was 42 winters old that night, an alpha at the height of his strength, and he had not felt watched like this since his own father died. He found his voice. He told her the scroll was a forgery, or the bride was dead, or both. He told her he wanted the truth before the moon cleared the east tower. He told her if she lied to him he would not kill her in the hall, because a king does not waste a hall floor on liars, but he would walk her out past the gate himself. She listened to all of it without moving. Then she answered him in a voice that was lower than he expected. She told him the bride was alive. She told him the bride was hidden and safe and not for sale. She told him the 3 chests of silver had been stolen on the road by men who wore Northpack colors, but did not answer to the Northpack lord. She told him she had been the one to find those men. She told him what she had done to them was not a story for a hall full of witnesses. Then she said the line that changed the night. She told him the carriage had not been sent by the Northpack at all. The carriage had been sent by her own people, in secret, by night riders who answered to no flag. She told him she had asked to be in it. She told him the chains were her idea. The torches in the great hall popped at the same moment, as if the fire itself was startled. The scribe dropped his scroll. Doran's hand went to his hilt and stayed there. Selim did not move. He asked her very quietly why. Why ride into the hall of a man who could break her neck before her boots dried, in chains, dressed for war, under a false name? Why come at all? She crossed the black line. She crossed it slowly. She crossed it with her hands open and visible. She crossed it the way a wolf crosses an old border. When she stopped, she was close enough that he could see her pulse moving in the scar on her throat. She lifted her chin so the wolf-fang choker caught the firelight, and she finally said her real name. The name landed in the hall like a stone in a well. The 2 old guards stepped back without being told. The scribe sat down on the floor. Doran said a single short word under his breath that no beta is ever supposed to say in front of his king. Selim heard all of it from a great distance, because his own pulse had begun a slow, hard hammer against the inside of his ribs. She was the lost warrior queen of the rival pack, the one his own scouts had reported dead in the snow on the Moon Ridge 2 winters back, the one he had drunk a quiet cup of wine to, alone, the night the report came in, because killing her in the field had never sat right with him even when he thought he had ordered it. She was not dead. She had been smuggled by her own people into his hall in the carriage that should have carried his bride. And before he could find a single useful word, she moved. She moved fast. Faster than a woman who had been chained for a day on a road had any right to move. Her hand went under the wide leather belt at her hip and came back up with a thin blade no longer than a man's hand, hidden flat against the iron buckle. The two old guards started forward. Doran shouted. Selim lifted one finger, and they all froze. She did not raise the blade at him. She turned it. She laid the flat of it across her own open palm, hilt outward, and offered it to the Alpha King across the black stone line. A blade given hilt first. The oldest sign in any pact between the Iron Coast and the Moon Ridge. The sign that says my life is in your hand. The sign that says I am asking, not threatening. She told him she had a bargain for him. She told him he would not be able to refuse it. She told him she had not come alone. And then at the very edge of the hall, in the long shadow behind the throne where no one had been looking, something small moved. A child should not have been in that hall. A child of any age should not have been in that hall. But this was not a child. This was a folded cloak that had been waiting on the bench by the rear door, and the cloak was now standing, because whatever was inside it had stood up. The cloak was tall enough at the shoulder to be a grown man, and quiet enough to be a ghost. It did not step forward. It only waited, hood low, hands inside sleeves, breathing slow. The warrior queen did not turn to look at the figure. She kept her eyes on Selim and the offered blade flat in her palm. She told him the figure under the cloak was the reason she was here. She told him the figure under the cloak was the reason 3 chests of silver did not matter anymore. She told him that what walked off that carriage tonight, alongside her, was going to rewrite the bloodlines of every pack from the Iron Coast to the Moon Ridge. And then very calmly she went quiet. The hall went quiet with her. Outside in the courtyard, the wind dropped. The horses stopped stamping. Even the torches seemed to pull their breath in. For one long moment, the kingdom of the Alpha King of the Iron Ridge held perfectly still, and the only sound in his great hall was the soft tick of melting wax as it slid down a candlestick onto the stone. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. A draft slid under the iron doors, and the moment broke. Selim did not take the blade. He stood up instead. He stood up to his full height, which was the kind of height that reminded people why the Iron Ridge pack had chosen him for the throne. He looked past her, past the offered hilt, straight at the cloaked figure in the back shadow. He said one word. "Show me." The cloaked figure did not move at first. The warrior queen turned her head a quarter inch and gave a sound that was not a word, only a low note in the back of her throat. The figure lifted its hands and pushed the hood back. It was a man, not a boy. A grown man, perhaps 30 winters, with pale hair tied back and a face that nobody in that hall expected to see again, because every banner pack from the Iron Coast to the Moon Ridge had heard, 6 winters earlier, that this man was buried under a cairn on a foreign beach. He was the lost prince of the rival pack, the warrior queen's brother, the last full-blood heir of a line everyone, including Selim, had quietly written off as ended. Doran sat down. He did not mean to. His knees just gave a finger's width, and the bench caught him. Selim had been a king long enough to feel 3 different futures snap into place at once, and to feel 2 of them snap shut again. A living rival heir inside his hall, under his roof in chains delivered by his own paid coin, was a weapon. It was a weapon that could be used against him in 100 ways by 100 enemies. It was also a weapon nobody else in the world knew he was holding. He looked back at the warrior queen. He let his eyes drop, finally, to the offered blade in her palm. He still did not take it. He asked her, instead, what the bargain was. She told him. She told him her brother was the rightful heir to a pack that had been carved up and sold off in pieces by 3 rival lords, while everyone thought the line was dead. She told him those 3 lords were the same men who had stolen Selim's silver chests on the road, and the same men who had been quietly feeding the border war that was bleeding his warriors dry. She told him the war he was trying to end with a bride was not a war between his pack and hers. It had never been. It was a war the 3 lords had built on purpose, to keep both packs weak, and to keep both thrones too busy to count their own coin. Selim felt the floor tilt very slightly under his boots. Believe me, when a king feels the floor tilt, he does not show it. He nodded once slowly, as if she had told him the weather. She kept going. She told him she did not want his crown. She did not want his hall. She did not want his bed, and she watched his face when she said it, and her scarred mouth did the small thing again. She wanted 3 things only. She wanted his banner at her brother's back when he walked into the rival pack's old throne room and reclaimed it. She wanted his iron, openly, in daylight, in numbers the 3 lords could count from a long way off. And she wanted his word, sworn under the moon at the next full rise, that when her brother sat the rival throne again, the border between their packs would be drawn in ink and not in blood, and would never be redrawn in either lifetime. In exchange, she offered him 3 things back. She offered him the heads of the 3 lords who had taken his silver, delivered in 3 sealed boxes within 1 cycle of the moon. She offered him the bride he had originally paid for, alive and willing, sent down from the Pale Hollow under proper escort, with a true seal, as soon as her brother was on his throne. And she offered him a thing she said no Alpha King had been offered in 7 generations. She offered him an alliance binding. Not a marriage. A binding. Selim knew the word. Every Alpha in the hall knew the word. It was older than crowns. It was a pact 2 ranking wolves swore to each other in front of a witness moon, throat to throat, blade to blade, no priest, no contract, no escape. A binding could not be broken by either party, while both still drew breath. A binding made the 2 packs, for all matters of war and blood and trade, a single body with 2 heads. There had not been one between 2 ruling lines since before his great-grandfather wore the iron-ridge cloak. Selim did not answer. He walked around her. He walked a slow circle that took him past the cloaked brother, past the 2 old guards, past the seated scribe, and back to his bench. He did not sit. He laid his palm on the carved arm of it. He looked at the woman who was, by every count he had ever been taught, his enemy, and who had walked into his hall in chains of her own making to offer him the cleanest end to a dirty war he had been losing slowly for 2 years. He asked her one last question. He asked her why she had come herself. He asked her why she had not sent her brother openly with a banner and a horn. Why the chains? Why the false name? Why the wedding carriage? She answered him plainly. She told him a banner and a horn would have died on the road, the same way his silver chests had died on the road. She told him the 3 lords had eyes inside the Northpack court and inside his own. She told him a wedding carriage, paid for in his coin, on his road under his protection, was the one carriage in the kingdom that the 3 lords would not dare to stop. She told him the chains had been her idea because a chained woman in a wedding carriage drew the eye, and an eye on her was an eye off the cloak in the back of the carriage. She told him her brother had ridden the last 40 leagues curled under a bench with her boot heel pressed to his shoulder, so he would not breathe too loud. The hall was so quiet that Selim could hear the wax tick again. He looked at the blade still flat in her palm. He looked at her face. He looked at the brother in the cloak who had not moved or spoken once. He looked last at Doran, his beta of 15 winters, the man who had bled with him in every border skirmish, and Doran gave him the smallest nod a beta can give and still call it a nod. Selim reached out. He did not take the blade. He closed his hand around hers, around the hilt, so that the blade was held between their 2 palms. He held it there. He looked into the winter river, eyes one full breath. Then he turned the blade outward, away from both of them, and laid it gently flat on the carved arm of his bench. A blade set down by both parties. The oldest answer in any pact to bargain offered hilt first. The answer that means I have not yet sworn, but I have not yet refused. The answer that means we will speak again, in private, before the moon clears the tower. She let her hand fall back to her side. Selim did not smile. Alpha Kings of the Iron Ridge line did not smile at moments like this. But he tipped his head a finger's width toward the inner door, the one that led to the small council chamber behind the throne, and she understood. Her brother understood. Doran understood. The 2 old guards, who had stood at that door for 20 winters, opened it without being asked. The 5 of them stepped through. The door closed. The scribe was left alone in the great hall with the spilled wax and the cooling torches, and a story he was already trying to forget. Because he knew, in the part of his belly that scribes learned to listen to, that what had walked off that carriage tonight was going to be sung about in halls he would never live to see. The carriage in the courtyard creaked once in the wind. The horses snorted and stilled. And the kingdom of the Alpha King of the Iron Ridge, without anyone outside that hall yet knowing it, had just shifted on its foundation by the width of a single wolf-fang choker. In the small council chamber behind the throne, only one candle burned. Selim sat. The two old guards stepped outside and pulled the door shut. Selim laid both hands flat on the table. He told her he believed her. He told her he would not say so in front of any other ears until the three lords were dead. He told her that until the heads arrived, her brother would live in a tower of the keep that nobody outside this chamber knew existed, with food and books and one window. She would live in the room across the hall from him. Neither would set foot in the courtyard by daylight. He told her it was not a prison. It was the only roof in the kingdom he could promise would not be sold out from under them in their sleep. She accepted with a single nod. He told her the binding would be sworn under the next full moon, in the old grove above the ridge, with Doran and one priest as the only witnesses. He told her the men he sent for the three heads would be his oldest hunters, riding out tonight before the bride news could leak past the courtyard. He told her his scouts on the Pale Hollow Road would be doubled by dawn, so the real bride, when she came, would come under 100 bows. Her brother spoke then for the first time. His voice was rough from disuse but steady. He told the king he had not asked for any of this. He had spent 6 winters in a foreign monastery copying books, and he would have stayed there until his hair went white if his sister had not come for him on a stolen horse 3 months ago. He did not want a throne. He wanted the throne back in the family, because the alternative was watching his pack be sold off in pieces by men who had murdered his father. Once the rival throne was sat by his line, he intended to abdicate within a year to a council of elders and go home to his books. Selim studied him. Then he said quietly that this was the most honest thing he had heard a man say in a throne room in 20 years. The brother inclined his head a finger's width, and the warrior queen looked at her brother with an expression nobody else in the chamber was supposed to see. That was the moment Selim understood, all the way down in his ribs, that the woman he was about to bind himself to for life was not a war queen first and a sister second. She was a sister first. The war queen was a costume she had put on to keep her brother alive long enough to copy more books. He stood up. He picked the thin blade up from the table. He turned it hilt outward and laid it back in her palm. He told her he was returning her weapon because a sworn ally walked armed under his roof. He told her if anyone in the keep gave her a reason to use it before the binding was sworn, she was to bring him the body and they would discuss it afterward. Her scarred mouth did the small shape one more time. It was almost a smile now. It was the shape a wolf makes after the fence has been tested and found, against all expectation, to be sound. 3 weeks later, the first sealed box arrived at the Ironridge gate. It came tied to the saddle of a riderless horse, the way old hunters had been sending answers home for 10 generations. The guard who untied it did not open it. He carried it straight to the king. Selim opened it himself, alone in his council chamber, with the warrior queen sitting across from him for the second time. Inside the box was the head of the first of the 3 lords, packed in salt and pine needles, eyes closed, mouth closed, a small clean cut at the throat that spoke of a single hunter and a single arrow at very close range. Pinned to the salt was a strip of bark with a single rune burned into it. The rune was the old Ironridge mark for one of 3. The second box came 11 days after that. The third box came on the morning of the full moon. That same night, in the old grove above the Iron Ridge, under a sky so clear the stars looked sharp enough to cut on, the Alpha King of the Iron Ridge and the lost warrior queen of the rival pack stood throat to throat, blade to blade, with Doran on one side and a single white-bearded priest on the other, and they swore the binding that had not been sworn between 2 ruling lines in 7 generations. Neither of them shook. Neither of them blinked. The priest spoke the old words. The blades passed once lightly across each other's palms, drawing the same thin line of red, and the two lines of red were pressed together and held until they were one line. When it was done, the warrior queen lifted her freshly cut palm to her own throat, beside the old scar, and pressed her bloody print there. Selim lifted his to his own throat in the same place. The priest stepped back. Doran exhaled slowly, the way a man exhales who has been holding his breath for 2 years without realizing it. In the spring, the rival throne was sat by the brother in the cloak, exactly as she had promised. Within a year, exactly as he had promised, he abdicated to a council of elders and went back to his books. Although now he visited the Iron Ridge Keep 4 times a year and sat in the small council chamber with a cup of wine and argued with Selim about old monastery texts until the candles burned blue. The border between the two packs was drawn in ink. The ink held. It is still holding. The delicate Omega bride, Lyra of the Pale Hollow, came south at last under 100 bows, was greeted with full honor at the Iron Ridge Gate, was thanked by the king in person for her patience, and was given the choice freely to return home with her father's blessing or to stay as a daughter of the Iron Ridge Court. She chose to stay. She married 2 summers later, a young captain of Selim's guard, and lived a long quiet life in a house with a garden and 3 dogs, and the war that had nearly cost her a life she did not ask for became, in her old age, a story she told her grandchildren on winter nights with the same calm voice she had been raised to use. The 3 lords were never spoken of again by name. Their packs were absorbed peacefully into the 2 restored thrones. The roads opened. The silver moved. The border villages, for the first time in living memory, slept the whole night through. And on the steps of the great hall of the Iron Ridge Keep, on every anniversary of the night the carriage came, the Alpha King and his bound queen walked down together to where the carriage had stopped. They did not speak. They did not need to. He laid one hand on the stone where her boot had first hit. She laid one hand on his. The torches guttered. The horses in the courtyard breathed. And whoever was watching from the wall walk on those nights swore afterward that the 2 of them stood there for exactly the same long count it had taken him, all those winters ago, to decide not to call the archers down. Some bargains are sworn under the moon. Some are sworn on stone steps in the cold wind, before either party knows a bargain is being made. And every now and then, when a kingdom is very lucky, the figure that steps off the carriage at dusk is not the one you paid for. It is the one you needed.